Purchase price, section 2. Okay, this again has an asterisk. So purchase price is in numbers and it says US currency. How Florida of you. You definitely want to make sure you're talking about the same currency, okay? If Florida is a very international state, so we want to make sure we're on the same page. That's what this is all about, right? That's probably why this is a 12-page contract. Not every state has a 12-page contract, folks. Okay. Line 28, asterisk, initial deposit. This is that earnest money deposit that you want to put. That's what you would put here. You need to check one of these, either a company's offer or is going to be made. It's going to be made within, the payment is going to be made. I'm like, this is strange, is to be made within a certain amount of days. If it's blank, then that's 3, the default, okay? So if you want to say 1, 2, or 4 or 5, whatever, I probably would say just go with the default. But if there's any sort of reason why you should do a different date, put it there, okay? If neither box is checked, then the option shall be deemed selected. This is where you put the buyer's preferred escrow agent. The buyer normally chooses. If the seller wants to choose the buyer, it's the buyer's discretion if they want to use that seller's agent, okay? Escrow agent name, address, phone, email, fax. I don't know about fax anymore, but yes, there's still fax numbers probably for mortgage lenders and for title companies. So if you know it, put it there, okay? You want to make sure that this contract is filled out as much as possible. And if there's any blank fields that aren't indicated by something like this, if left blank, then 3, you want to put something there. If it's not applicable, NA. If it's 0, 0. You want to make sure it's filled out, okay? Number 36, so you can see all of these are asterisks. You need these things. Additional deposit to be delivered to escrow agent within a certain amount of days. If left blank, then that's 10 days after effective date. Financing, we'll be going over this in paragraph 8, okay? But if they're financing, you put the financed amount here, and then anything other here, and then the balance. You want to make sure that all of these numbers make sense and they add up, okay? They need to make sense. Double check that math. Section 3, acceptance of offer and counter offers. Time for acceptance of offer and counter offers, effective date. You see here, the asterisk kind of helps you through, right? It kind of shows where the fields are that you need to fill in. So this is where you would put when the executed copy, if not signed by the buyer and seller, an executed copy will be delivered to all parties on or before this date. This offer shall be deemed withdrawn and the deposit shall be returned to the buyer. So this is definitely something you want to put here because you want to give, I mean, you can't just give a blank check, right? You're not just saying, oh, you have, a week to look at this offer. And then what do you know? All these other offers are coming in. You want to make sure that you are top of mind and your offer is considered a priority. So you put a date there. I often would put like the next day. It's up to you. It's up to you, but it makes sense that you have a day or two, and that's about it, right? So section 4, closing date. This is what this buyer is proposing as the closing date. This is what you want the seller to agree to. This is likely something that could be countered. It's often countered along with the price because, we don't know what the situation is with the seller, but we want to make sure that we're on the same page and the closing date is good for both parties because that will lead to a more smooth outcome. Section 5 is extension of the closing date. In the event closing funds from buyer's lender are not available on the closing date due to Consumer Financial Protection Bureau closing disclosure. If paragraph 8B is checked, the loan approval has been obtained and the lender's underwriting is complete, then closing date shall be extended. So they're not extending this closing date for any reason. They're extending it because the loan officer is saying everything is fine it's just this erroneous issue that we can't get around. So examples that I've had before is that, oh gee, if it's a FHA or like a USDA loan, the USDA loan system is backlogged a couple days. I mean, we're not going to make it to closing. Like it's some reason where it's extraneous. Like there's nothing you can do. There's nothing the buyer can do to close on time, but they are fully approved. They've gone through everything. They're just waiting on those monies, right? Something like that, then that's the extension of the closing date. I would again have all of this in writing, and I would have very clear and consistent communication with that between buyer's agent and seller's agent. Make sure that communication is really strong so that as soon as you know of something that could keep you from closing on time, but it's not the buyer's fault, you want to make sure that's covered and taken care of right off the get-go, right? So that's what that's about. Now, here's something else. In the event constituting force majeure, this is something that Floridians unfortunately have to deal with. Hurricanes, that's a force majeure. That's a hazard. That's a hazard of conditions that nobody can nobody can help that. That's just a force of nature. That's what force majeure means. So then that's saying that closing that the closing date is going to be extended. So section 3, acceptance of offer and counter offers. 43, line 43 is section 3. Okay, time for acceptance, right? If not signed by the buyer and the seller, an executed copy delivered to all parties on or before this offer shall be deemed withdrawn and the deposit returned. This is something that you need to have here. If the acceptance of this offer or this counter offer is not by 2 days from now or whatever date you're putting in there, then this offer is dead. You need to understand that, okay? This offer isn't good forever. You have to put a deadline on there. And I'm sure a lot of people put like today's date or whatever when they're sending this offer. But as we're getting more into this buyer's, we're transitioning into a buyer's market from a seller's market. You're going to see the change in this area on the contract. You're going to see that maybe you can give them a day or two. Okay. So line 48, that's section 3B. That's just kind of clarifying that the effective date of this contract shall be the date when the last one, either the buyer or the seller, has signed and initialed. Okay, so everybody's in compliant. Everybody is executed. They've executed this contract, so that's considered the effective date. Then any timeline thereafter would start that next day. So section 4, closing and closing date. The closing of the transaction actually occurs when all funds required for closing are received by the closing agent and collected pursuant to Standard S, and all closing documents required to be furnished for each party are delivered. So unless modified by other provisions of this contract, the closing shall occur on this date. This is a very important, see, there's an asterisk. It's important to choose the closing date here. Now that could be negotiated, okay?